All right, guys, welcome back to another form check. Today, we are going to talk about just some kettlebell fundamentals. We're going to be going over the racks and the starting position. This is very fundamental level. It might be a reminder for some of you guys, something new for some of you, but it's just a refresher. So here we go. The first things first, your starting position. You're either going to start in three positions. We have the dead start, which for the dead start, you're gonna start with the kettlebell in between your heels, not by your toes, not in front of you, in between your heels. This is your dead start. This is where we deadlift. This is where we row. Anything dead. There's so many dead exercises that we could do. We could do a dead clean. We could do a dead snatch. Anything dead, this is where you're gonna be. And when you're doing dead, you want to make sure you have your shoulders back, your hip is back, and you have that neutral spine. That neutral spine right here. You don't want to be rounded. You don't want to be also too arched up. You want to be kind of like in the middle. Now, for the dead, typically when we're talking about dead things, we're talking about power. We're coming from a dead position, meaning we're not using any momentum. So we're trying to generate as much force into the ground with the feet. To help you with that, you could have an upright chest. Kind of like an upright chest like this. It's going to be way more explosive for you to come all the way to that clean. You could be right here. You don't necessarily have to be chest down. You will be your strongest and your most explosive if your chest is as upright as possible. Now, this is going to be very uncomfortable. It's going to be a hard start, as opposed if I'm here, I'm kind of it's still in an uncomfortable position, but I'm more chilling. If I'm here, this is very hard, but this is when you're really going to be explosive. So that is the dead position. Now we're going to talk about the hike position. This is when we start anything that we hike back. Your swings, it could be your cleans, it could be your snatches. We're in this position a lot. This is a kettlebell position. So for this, the kettlebell's in front of you. You take about 2 feet back, and you want your toes, your feet facing forward. You don't want to be pointing the feet out. Face forward, and you don't want to be too wide, especially with one kettlebell. If you're too wide, you're not going to be as powerful. If I'm all the way over here and I try to jump, that's going to be an okay jump. But if I'm here and I try to jump, that's going to be a way higher, more powerful jump. So think about that. You could always push the ground better with a narrow stance as opposed of a wide stance. So that's why we want to be as narrow as possible. I like to think, don't just be as wide as the kettlebell. Boom, get on the kettlebell, boom, my feet are outside, take a step back. That should be your stance. If you're working with 2 kettlebells, obviously you're gonna have to be a little bit wider, but again, just go as wide as the 2 kettlebells. So that's one thing, don't be too wide on this hike position. Now, same deal, shoulders are back, shoulders are down, and you throw the hips back, throw the butt back, you're in that good deadlift position. Same thing, neutral spine, you're facing wherever your chest is facing. So if I'm down here, I'm kind of looking at the ground. If I'm up here, I'm kind of looking up. You got to keep that. What you don't want is to be in this position. You want the alignment of your skull because your skull is part of your spine. So from here, once you're in that deadlift position, all you do is reach for the kettlebell and tilt the kettlebell towards you. You want to pretend that you're breaking the handle. That way you engage your lats. So this is your hike position. From here, we could go into the swing, we could go into the clean, we could go same thing, single arm, swing here, or cleans, anything. But we're talking about the position. You cannot just go and let's fucking go, let's start this. You have to start with a position, with a hard position. It's called a hard start, easy finish. Own it. This is how people get injured. They don't pay attention to the start. They just go with it, boom, you tweak something. Start. So we got the dead, kettlebell right in between the heels. this way. We have the height kettlebells in front of you. You have to be able to pull. You should be far enough that you're able to pull hard. You cannot be like this. If not, you're not gonna get a good pull. It has to be far enough that you get a good pull. Now the third position, and it's something that this is very advanced, and most of you are not gonna be even in this position a lot, but it's the hang position. So when we talk about hang, it's like halfway of a deadlift. So if I'm right here, my hang position will be the kettlebell hanging right below my knee, which would be this position right here. This is a hang position. So this is like the hardest position. This is like a dead position, but even harder because you don't even have that much momentum to generate power. So from here, you will go into the clean, hang, into the snatch, hang again, whatever the case may be. So that's the hang position. So the hang position is actually easier to get to because it's just half a deadlift. But the exercise itself is actually fucking harder because you have no momentum. It's easier to clean from the ground all the way up here than to clean from here. You really have to generate power through the floor. So on all those three positions, mainly the two positions, the two first positions, the dead and the hike, if you feel like you can't get down into that position because your back keeps rounding, like you're like, okay, I'm good. And when you go to reach, everything fucking breaks down because of your mobility and flexibility. Your hamstrings are tight. You have no mobility on your back. Your glutes might be tight as hell. All of this is not your fault, but you should gotta know that, okay, I'm not there yet. I can't get into this position without rounding my back. So maybe what you gotta do is, all you gotta do is elevate the kettlebell. Think of a yoga block. Think of a bench. Think of a box in the gym. Because if I have this right here, I'm gonna use an example. All you have to do is do this. Boom. You're in that high position to start. You can start because this right here is gonna be too hard and you're gonna have to bend your back. You elevate the kettlebell, it's gonna be way easier on your mobility. Your mobility is gonna get, and flexibility is gonna get better over time, but this is a very safe way to start. Same thing with the dead position. You see some people, they could deadlift up to here, but if they go more down than that, they start rounding the back. So you put a yoga block down there, or a box, or a plyo box, and then you tap, and then you go, you start from that position. So those are three kettlebell positions you absolutely have to own. Those are your fundamentals. Got the dead position, the height position, and the hang position. Now, let's talk about the rack. The rack. Once you get into that position, now you could, the first thing we'll learn is the two-hand clean. Two-hand clean. Now, for the two-hand clean, this is your starting position, whether you're in a hike or in a dead. This is how you're gonna start. As you pull the kettlebell up, your hands go from the handle, the top, to the horns, the sides. So you actually have to let go of the kettlebell so it could glide. So you go from here to here, here to here. This is how you two-hand clean and how you get to the rack. Now, when you're in the rack, you want to make sure your hands are the closest to the color. This is a white label right here. I know it's a little fucked up. I spray painted, but you want your hands as close as possible to the body of the kettlebell. You don't want to be over here all fucking awkward. You want to be as close as possible, elbows tight to the rim, and this is your rack position. This is your rack position. Now, a high rack position is when you elevate the elbows and you look through the window. You look through the window. So if you're ever doing marches or something like that, or you want to challenge yourself a little bit more, you do a high rack where you look through the hole of the kettlebell, and then you could do your marches, or you could even clean the kettlebell to the high rack just like this. Now, that's the two-hand rack. Now we're going to the one hand. So right here, this right here, this is your single arm kettlebell rack. So you want the handle of the kettlebell to be as down as possible. Get it as down as possible. Use your other hand if you need to. Right here, you should be able to open and close, open and close. Knuckles should be all the way up facing the roof. You should not ever have a bended wrist like this. It is either completely straight or in a little bit. You could go in a little bit, that's fine. Elbow is right tucked into the rib. So you're like a boxer, you're like ready for war right here, like with a punch. So this is your strong rack. You also don't want to be having it across. It's nothing necessarily wrong with this. It's just lazy as shit. You're not gonna be your strongest here. You're gonna be your strongest right here, vertical, vertical. It's called joint stacking. You stack the elbow joint with the wrist joint. Joint stacking. You're gonna be your strongest here. What happens when you're here and you're doing squat, you get fatigued, this shit is just gonna fall. This is how you prevent things to fall. It's gonna be a lot challenging, a lot more challenging on the core, but it's gonna get you strong. But this is a strong rack, and this is what we want. It works the same thing if you have two kettlebell. Now the last thing will be the overhead. The overhead rack, which is this way. So one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to over shrug your shoulder like this. You want to pack the shoulder down, keep the elbow locked, and the rack, it's the same thing. Knuckles are facing up, you don't have a bended wrist, you keep the same rack, but now we're just overhead. And the main thing about the overhead is the elbow. You need to keep the elbow locked. The moment you bend the elbow just a little bit, there's a chance that kettlebell could fall. You gotta lock it in, whatever you may be doing. You have marches or you press, you finish like this. You finish all the way through. Don't just kind of, I kind of did it. No, you gotta completely lock, completely punch the roof. So this is your overhead. This is your single rack. You know, same thing happens when you have two kettlebells. You're here or you're here, and then that's pretty much it. The very last one is just a suitcase, and this is like, you know, there's really nothing much to it. You just hold in this thing like you have a suitcase. What you do want to have is your shoulders back and down, and you want to be looking straight forward. Usually if you do suitcase walks or whatever, people tend to pinch their chin down like this. You want to push the neck back and look straight forward. Top posture. If you have one kettlebell, people tend to lean towards one side. That's what's naturally gonna want to happen. You're gonna want to lean towards one side. You got to make sure you stay center, engage your core, and then march or do the walking, whatever the case may be. This goes for the rack and the overhead. You're always gonna wanna, you gotta fight that leaning towards one side. Guys, that is all. These are fundamentals that all of you should have on deck. These are your fundamentals. Everybody should be crispy on these. You got your dead position, your hike position, hang position for more advanced people, and we got the suitcase, single rack, and overhead rack. Let's go. Talk to you guys soon.